Welcome to our video devotion series, Speaking of God. Hebrews 12 says, "Let us run with perseverance the race marked before us." Well, I've been thinking a lot about races lately because I read an interesting article the other day that compared the COVID pandemic to a race. It was called "When a Sprint Becomes a Marathon." I think that's a perfect analogy for right now. When this COVID season started, we were running it like a sprint. We thought this would last maybe a few weeks, maybe a few months. Well, 4 months in now, with no end in sight, it's clear we're running a marathon. Now, I'm not a runner, but I know, and I think most of us know, the difference between a 100-yard dash and a long, full 26.2-mile marathon. Those are very different races, and they require very different strategies. So when I heard this analogy about the sprint versus marathon approach to the COVID pandemic, I took a pause and I had to think to myself, am I still running this like a sprint? I ask you, are you still running this like a sprint? If so, it could be wise to take stock and reevaluate how you are running this race. What are the coping mechanisms at your disposal? What are the self-care practices that you are employing? What are your touch points spiritually and emotionally for health and well-being? It could be time to shift gears and to make sure that the strategies we're using are the ones that are going to serve us in the long run. So I offer you this analogy. Is it a sprint or a marathon? And what's the difference in how we run the two? Because it's the long game now. And so we would do well to use the stewardship that God has given us for the resources God has given us and make sure we know which kind of race we're running. May God be with you in the running of this race and in the living of these days.